I don't think there's ever been a person alive who loves to experience car trouble. There's something about when those lights on your dash begin to just pop up that instantaneously your heart just sinks and you just can't help but be a little bit more concerned than you were just a few moments ago as you think about how much is this going to cost me, or how much time is this going to take away from my life, or how am I going to be able to do the things that I normally do if my car is going to be in the shop for a while. A woman knew that something was going on with her car one day when the light on her dash indicated that her oil level was low. And so she did the responsible thing. She got out, she checked it just to make sure that it was in fact actually low, and it was. So she just kind of topped it off, kind of like most of us would do in that instance, and she just kind of went on about her day. But a couple of days later, that indicator light popped on again. She checked the level again, and the oil was once again low, and she knew that there was probably a deeper problem here. So she took it to a local mechanic and kind of explained the situation, that her oil level has been leaking, it seems like, and that there must be a problem somewhere. The mechanic took the car into the back, he put it up on the lift, and he started looking for all the usual problem spots when an oil leak happens. Didn't take him too long to discover that the line that actually fed into the engine that put the oil towards the bearings itself had a nice hole. Sure enough, there was an issue there. If something wasn't done about this particular problem, it could have some serious consequences for this car going forward. If engine bearings don't get the proper lubrication, they can seize up and it can actually ruin your entire engine. A small little problem can become a very large problem pretty soon. But the mechanic kind of knew that if he told her that it is in fact an oil leak coming from the main line to the engine, that it was likely going to take a few days and cost several hundreds of dollars, that this woman is not going to be really happy to hear that news. So instead, he topped off her oil level and sent her on her way. A CEO of a small but growing business should have been on cloud nine, should have been completely over the moon. He just experienced the greatest single quarter in his company's history. They had sold far more product than they had ever sold before. Their customer satisfaction was at an all-time high, and their employees all seemed to love their jobs. And yet, the CEO found himself rather troubled as he looked over the profit sheets. Because based on the amount of product that they'd been selling, while their profits were at an all-time high, they should have actually been even higher. He couldn't figure out what was going on. This was, again, the greatest quarter he'd ever had as the owner and CEO of this entire company. And yet it seems like they're still losing money in the midst of all this. So he did the responsible thing. He pulled up all the different sales sheets from all his different salesmen, and sure enough, his worst fears were confirmed. His top salesman, the guy who's probably most responsible for them being in this amazing position that they'd never been in before, the guy who had been with him practically since the beginning, was skimming off the top. As he pulled up his sales sheets from years past, it seemed like he'd been doing this for a very long time, and over the course of time, he'd only taken more and more, gotten even more daring. The CEO knew what had to happen. This was a fireable offense. This is something that needed to be taken care of. He had the evidence to back it up, that this was truly something that needed to get rid of him. But it can take a long time to find a new salesman. It can be expensive as you bring in different people to hire, and you're losing profit because you don't have a salesman who's out there doing it. Plus, you don't know how many clients are going to leave because this salesman that they've done business with for years is no longer a part of the company. And he's taken a little off the top, but still our profits are at an all-time high. Is it really going to hurt things if we just leave it alone? A man sat on the paper-lined bed of his doctor's office, recounting to his doctor the pain that he'd been feeling in his abdomen. It started several weeks ago, but it wasn't really anything major. But the last couple of days, when it flares up, it stops everything. He thought at first that maybe it was just, some sort of like stomach issue, or maybe it was heartburn, so he took some antacids, but they're not really helping the situation anymore. The doctor says, well, let's not worry about it just yet. Lie back, and he feels around on the man's belly, trying to see if he can feel what a source might be, and he's just not finding anything. Nothing's really standing out to him. And so the doctor does the responsible thing. He has the man go in for a CT scan to see if maybe they can discover the root cause of what's really going on here. Tells the guy, don't worry about it, it's probably nothing, but we just want to kind of cross this off the list. Besides, your health insurance will cover it, and that's what's most important, right? So the man goes in for a CT scan, and as soon as the doctor sees the results of that scan, there it is. Cancer. Aggressive, problematic, life-threatening cancer. If the man doesn't start receiving treatments, it's going to do nothing but spread. It's going to cause all kinds of other issues for him, including the end of his life. But nobody likes to share bad news with somebody, right? And this doctor and his patient have always gotten along. They've always been friendly with one another. And if I shared this news with him, it could change that relationship. So instead, the doctor prescribed him pills to help manage his pain and sent him on his way. Not doing anything to fix the cancer itself, but instead looking to solve a symptom. There are major problems in life. Problems that rise up out of nowhere, that affect every single facet of our lives. Problems that we just have to face, that don't have any easy solutions to them. These problems come up and they disrupt the harmony that we experience in our lives, the harmony that we try to experience in our lives. And it seems like it's our natural reaction when these problems come up to just address them as quickly as we can, to try to get past them so we can get back to the harmony. But far too often when we do that sort of thing, we just take care of a symptom. We don't address the root cause of that problem. We don't deal with what's really the underlying issue, because if we just deal with the symptom, then maybe things can just get back to normal. Symptoms are easy to manage. Root problems are difficult. They take time. They can be painful to try to get rid of entirely. But the problem comes when we don't deal with the root problems, that those symptoms get far more aggressive. The problem gets so much worse until things are just completely destroyed altogether. Over the course of this series, we have been looking at the different things that threaten to disrupt or even destroy the unity that we as the Church of Jesus Christ are meant to share. The unity that we're supposed to have with one another, the harmony that we're supposed to live in with one another. And to be certain, each and every one of them have that kind of power if they're left unchecked. But there's a common thread that runs through every single one of the things that divide that we've discussed so far. In fact, all of them share the very same root. And if our unity as a church body and our unity with the church, big C, is to ever maintain or persist, if it's ever going to mean anything, then we have to be willing to address the root problem, the heart of what causes our division, the heart of all the symptoms that we've discussed thus far. If we're willing to look deeper, this root problem may actually also be the problem for most of the problems we experience in our lives, in and out of the church. It is, in fact, the same problem that has plagued every single church body since the first one. It's even the underlying problem in our text today. We're going to eventually find ourselves in Acts chapter 5. So if you want to go ahead and turn there in your Bible, go ahead. Stick your thumb there. We're going to get there eventually. But as we are turning there, I'm going to remind you of some of the stuff that I always remind you of when we get to early Acts, because I think it's something that we need to remind ourselves of. This is still the first days of the church. The church is brand spanking new, still got that new church smell. I imagine it's rosemary, but that's just me. Frankincense, okay. It's still a brand new thing. Nobody really knows exactly what this is supposed to be. It's kind of a beautiful chaos of disorganization, right? Nobody knows what this is supposed to look like. We just got the Holy Spirit. Jesus just ascended less than a couple of weeks ago. And so we're just trying to figure all this out as we go, right? We're learning what it means to lean on this new thing, the Holy Spirit, that just came a few days ago. Right now, it's just a group of people who just love Jesus and love each other, and it's not any more complicated than that. Oh man, wouldn't that be great? If it was just that simple, to just love Jesus, love each other, and we move on. Seems like somebody said that at one point in time. But seriously, they have no real idea of what it is that they're doing. They're just simply meeting together every single day. They're having meals together. They're going to one another's houses. They're just worshiping Jesus and learning what it means to live in community with each other. Again, there's no real organization. They're still trying to figure out what all of it means. But one of the things that we know that has become important to this church, even early on, one of the things that has become kind of the cornerstone of what they're all about, is that they love each other so much so they're willing to do whatever it takes to take care of each other. See, again, this church, while it is young and still, grand scheme of things, relatively small, but it's kind of hard to call a church of over 3,000 people small. There's made up of different people from different socioeconomical backgrounds. You got some members who are very wealthy, some members who are struggling. And their love for Jesus and their love for each other is so much so that they want to make sure that each and every one of their needs are taken care of. And so you have members of this church doing crazy things that we've talked about. They're going and they're selling their possessions. They took what Jesus said in John chapter 13:35 very seriously when he said, "By this, everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another." So they're taking things from their homes, they're selling it, they're getting rid of property that they've had for a long time with no real clue what to do with. And they're taking that profit, those proceeds, that money, that cash, and they're laying it at the apostles' feet, trusting these men to distribute it to the members who have needs, to make sure that the brothers and sisters that they gather with on a consistent basis are taken care of. We see it in a verse that we've mentioned already before, Acts 2:45. It says they sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as any had need. Again, we have discussed this particular element of the church recently, within the last few months, but I still find myself blown away by this. The idea that they want to just show each other how much they love one another by selling things that mean something to them, all to make sure that you got food on your table, or a roof over your head, or clothes on your back. This is not a, I'll pray for that kind of love. This is a, I'll do anything to make sure it's taken care of kind of love. Can you imagine? That's a church service, right? People coming forward, hey, I sold this land. Let me give it to you so that way my brothers and sisters can be taken care of. Hey, I sold this family heirloom. It's been in my family for generations. Here's the money from it. Please make sure that somebody who needs it gets it. This intertwining of loving God and loving others is being expressed in a very, very real, tangible way. And it's absolutely beautiful. We know for a fact that some of the members of this early church didn't just sacrifice worthless possessions. They would actually give up generational income to see that one another was taken care of. In Acts chapter 4, verse 36 and 37, we read that Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus by birth, the one the apostles called Barnabas, which is translated, I still love it. I know, I've said it 100 times. I still love the nickname. It's fantastic. It translates, son of encouragement. Sold a field he owned. He brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. Again, I'm going to remind you, this is an economic system that is completely agricultural based. almost exclusively. Manufacturing is nowhere near what it's going to be. Sure, there are people who do jobs like fishermen and carpentry and stuff like that. But the bulk way of making money is by growing crops. And by Barnabas selling this particular field, he's not just giving up the income that he might have there. He's not just giving up the food that is going to go on to feed him and others. He's giving up income for his family for generations. And he's doing it with the sole motivation of wanting to show his brothers and sisters in Christ that he loves them so much that he wants to make sure that they're taken care of. No wonder why we call him the son of encouragement, right? But while I don't think this was his motivation, at least I have my doubts of it, I know human nature at least a little bit. And I'm willing to bet that that word of what Barnabas has done here, I don't know if he did it in private just with him and the apostles or if he did it a part of their church meeting time or whatever. But you got to imagine that somehow word gets out. And all of a sudden there's all kinds of little chatter amongst church people. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So we don't have to worry about that. But there's all these things that are being shared, like, could you believe what Barnabas did? That's incredible. I can't believe he did that sort of thing. What a great guy. Again, I don't think this was Barnabas' motivation. I don't think he wanted to get the pats on the back necessarily. But it's kind of an unintentional fallout of doing such an amazing act. That people are talking about all this different stuff about how great a guy Barnabas truly is. And eventually, a couple by the name of Ananias and Sapphira hear of what Barnabas has done. And they hear about how the people are saying what a great guy Barnabas is and how amazing he is. In Acts chapter 5, verse 1, which is immediately after we hear about this narrative of Barnabas. So Acts 4 ends on verse 37. Acts 5, verse 1 says, "But a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property." Now, Ananias and Sapphira are part of this early church. So they've seen these various acts of generosity that have been taking place. They've seen the way that people have laid the money in front of the apostles' feet with the sole purpose of trying to take care of others. And they've heard about how people are really in awe of what Barnabas has done. And the two of them, they own a piece of property that frankly they're just not doing anything with right now. It's just kind of there. If anything, it may be a little bit of a nuisance. And they've thought about it ahead of time of maybe we ought to sell this property. Maybe we ought to get rid of it. It's not doing us any good. But man, they keep hearing what people are saying about Barnabas. They keep hearing about what a great guy he is because of what he has done. And so they know that if they take the proceeds of selling this particular field and they lay it in front of the apostles' feet, that maybe the conversation will shift a little bit. And it won't be what a great guy Barnabas is, but what great people Ananias and Sapphira are. Can we admit that there's always a part of us that likes to hear that we're a great person? Can I admit that there's a part of me that likes to hear I'm a great person? But here's the thing, though. Ananias and Sapphira, they could kind of use some of the cash at least. Maybe they got a bill that's come due, or maybe their kids need new sandals, or maybe Sapphira's got her eye on a brand new wardrobe, and Ananias has got his eye on the latest and greatest power tool from Lowe's. We could give the money to the church and be told what great people we are, but then we couldn't do this stuff. Or we could do this stuff, but then people wouldn't think how great we are. It's a real Sophie's choice. But then they come up with an idea, a way to maybe have their cake and eat it too. We kind of see what happens in verse 2. It tells us simply that he kept back some of the proceeds with his wife's knowledge and brought a portion of it and laid it out at the apostles' feet. Now, that's a relatively innocuous idea, right? That he took some of the money, kept it for himself, and then he took some of it and gave it to the church, right? That's as much as we're given here. But the connotation here that Luke, our author of the book of Acts, is giving here is that Ananias presented this money in front of the apostles and said, we sold a field. This is all the proceeds. I think that way because if it had just been simply Ananias had said, well, we sold the field and we wanted to give you guys part of what we made off of it, I don't know that this story gets mentioned, right? That'd be like somebody recounting over here that, you gave your usual tithe on Sunday morning. Yeah, it's great that you did that, but you're going to do the same thing probably next week or next month or whenever it is that you choose to tithe, right? It's not banner headline news, and yet Luke feels the need to tell us about Ananias and Sapphira because the connotation is that Ananias said, hey, this is all the money we made. Look at what a great guy I am. What Ananias has done is lied. Kind of a dumb lie, if you think about it. But a lie nonetheless. He's presented this as being the full amount of what he's made. He's trying to convince the apostles that after selling this property, this is what he made, and he is selflessly giving it to the church. But the apostles sense that something is a little bit off. I don't know if somebody tells them or if maybe the Holy Spirit reveals it to them, but Peter calls out Ananias. He knows that Ananias is not giving the full amount, that Ananias has chosen to tell a lie. Understand, Peter's not upset that Ananias chose to hold back, right? Because one of the things that we need to remind ourselves about whenever we talk about this group of people selling the property and possessions in order to take care of each other, nobody told them to do that. That wasn't a command. It wasn't part of a sermon. It wasn't anything like that. It was just something somebody did once. People heard about it, and they thought, what a great idea, and they started doing it too. There was no command to make this happen. So Peter is not upset that Ananias has chosen to hold back some of the money. What Peter's upset by is that Ananias has lied about it. He's upset that he's lied in saying that this is the full amount. And in fact, in verse 4, Peter points out the whole reality to Ananias. He says, wasn't it yours while you possessed it? And after you sold it, wasn't it at your disposal? Why is it that you planned this thing in your heart? You have not lied to people, but to God. Again, Ananias was under no obligation whatsoever to give any of the money to the church. Nobody commanded him to do so. Nobody said you got to do this if you want to be part of the church. Any church that does that is probably a church body to avoid. But Ananias did this anyway. And again, had Ananias been truthful with the whole thing and said, this is part of what we made, we wanted to give it to the church so you guys could take care of others around him, that's still a great act of generosity. But instead, he's lied about it. It's a dumb thing to lie about. It's a dumb thing to just kind of say, hey, this is the whole amount. Him giving the money to the church and holding back some of it, that's not the problem. The problem comes when he lies to the apostles, to the church as a whole, in claiming this to be the full amount. And after Peter tells him all of this, in what had to be one of the most jarring moments of all time, Ananias drops dead. Going to be hard to forget that Sunday, right? This has nothing to do with anything we're going to talk about. I'm just going to go and share this with you because I'm here. It is kind of a dream of mine. If I've got to die, there are two ways I want to do so. Either in my sleep, because I love sleep. Might as well go out doing the thing I love. Or right here, right after I made a really great point. I want that mic drop moment, man. Because nobody's forgetting that Sunday. You remember that time Brandon dropped dead in front of us? Dude, I just went through therapy for that. But that's what happens to Ananias. He drops right dead. Poof, dead. That's a moment that happens in front of everyone. And just a little while after, the young men take Ananias' body and bury it, because this is before the times of embalming. If you don't take care of the body pretty soon, it's going to start smelling. Sapphira comes in. She has no idea what's just happened. She has not heard that her husband is dead yet. And Peter decides to ask her, hey, is this actually the full amount? Is this really what you guys sold the field, gave us all the money, right? Yep. Because again, don't forget, verse 2, Ananias did this with his wife's knowledge. Sapphira had a choice. She could have come clean. Granted, she had no idea what just happened to her husband. But she had a chance to not lie. She had a chance to tell them exactly what the truth was, to say that, yeah, it wasn't really. It was part of it. But instead, she chose to persist in the lie, and then she drops dead. For whatever reason, God in that moment decided to smite this couple for choosing to lie in front of the entire church. But the lie itself was just a symptom. See, because at the whole point of all this, we got to look at what their motivation was behind the lie, right? They had heard about what Barnabas had done. They had heard the people saying what a great dude Barnabas was, and they wanted that for themselves. They wanted to be heroes of the church. They wanted people to say how great Ananias and Sapphira are. They wanted to be lifted up as examples of wonderful Christians. But they also wanted to hold on to some of the money. Their motivation was 100% pure selfishness. They wanted to have themselves exemplified. They wanted to have themselves brought before it. They wanted everybody to see how great they are. They were not motivated in taking care of the needs of those around them. That was just going to be a happy little consequence as part of it. Their whole motivation was that they would be lifted high. It was 100% selfishness. Again, if this had been simply them wanting to help out but keep some of the money, so they just tell them this is part of the profit, I don't think we hear about this story. Maybe if we do, it's just kind of like a little blurb like Barnabas selling his field. But instead, these two wanted to tell this lie based out of selfishness. This whole thing was so avoidable. This did not have to happen. This was such a silly thing to lie about in the first place. Ananias and Sapphira did not have to die in the way that they did. But because they made a choice to be selfish, God made a decision to make sure that their selfishness didn't disrupt his church's unity. See, because at the root of it all, the biggest problem that we face is selfishness. Most of the stupid things that I can lay claim to in my life, the things that I've said, the things that I've done, if I'm honest with you, it's born out of my own selfishness, my desires to have people think about how cool I am or what a great guy that I am or how much fun I am to be around. I don't want to stand up here and give you a list, but just take me at my word. I've done a lot of stupid things based out of my selfish desire of acceptance. Based out of my selfish desire to make sure that I'm happy for a moment. Based out of my own selfish desire to feel really good. I'm willing to bet, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that for all of us in here, that if we were really going to be truthful about it, that most of the dumb things that we've done in our lives, most of the sin that we have carried with us has been born out of one thing and one thing only, our own selfishness. Every single one of us can lay claim to that. Every single one of us can lay claim to this notion that selfishness is at the root of most of the things that we have done wrong in our lives. And our own selfishness is the true enemy of our unity. Understand, in order for the church to have the kind of unity that Jesus himself prayed for, before going to the cross, again, I'm taking you all the way back to February, I think. The last thing that Jesus prayed for before they came and took him away was that his church would be united. Was that we would have this unity together. And in order for that unity to take place, selfishness cannot exist among us. Selfishness is completely against everything that Jesus taught, everything that Jesus demonstrated, everything that Jesus lived. Selfishness is the exact opposite of it. We wonder why we don't have a sense of unity within the church. It ultimately comes down to our inability to move beyond our own selfishness. Selfishness will cause us to squabble over things that just don't matter. Selfishness will cause us to reject any kind of correction. Selfishness will cause us to stand in judgment of those around us. Selfishness causes us to refuse compassion on those that need it most. Selfishness leads us into gossip so that we might feel superior. Selfishness tells us to glorify our preferences. Selfishness will always lead to the disunity and disruption of this church and any church that seeks to honor Jesus. His entire life, his entire time on earth, from the moment he was born till the time he died, Jesus demonstrated over and over and over again that we can't be selfish. If you go back and read over it, the ones that blow my mind the most are the times when Jesus is trying to get a moment to himself, where he's trying to go away to a quiet place so he can just reconnect with God, but people follow after him. Does Jesus say, "Hey guys, I need some me time here. Hey guys, I need a little mental health day"? No. Instead, he serves, he heals, he preaches, he teaches, he loves and encourages. Because there was nothing selfish about Jesus. And I don't know, I'm kind of crazy to think that maybe he did that for a reason. Maybe he did that to show us the example of what we're meant to be, because selfishness won't just destroy the unity within the church. Selfishness will destroy the unity in any relationship that we ever experience. Selfishness will lead us to not be the best friend that we could possibly be, to be there for our friends when they need us the most. Selfishness will lead us to become pretty lousy parents who look after ourselves instead of teaching our kids what they need to know most. Selfishness will destroy our marriages. Selfishness is something that we have to constantly look to reject. It's something that we can't have any place in if we're going to be a follower after Jesus. Understand, what we're saying, it's super easy for me to stand up here and say, don't be selfish. It's the easiest thing in the world for me to say it. Can I be honest with you? It's the hardest thing in the world for me to actually live out. Because I have this weird thing about me where I want what I want. I got a feeling that as soon as we get done here, my kids are going to have all kinds of suggestions of where they want to go to eat. I can tell you what it's going to be right now. Robin's going to say she wants hamburgers, because the kid always wants a hamburger. And Adrienne is likely going to say she wants Chinese food, because she's got really expensive taste, and I already feel bad for my future son-in-law. I really want Mexican food right now, if I'm being honest. I want chips, I want salsa, I want it all in me. Let's go. But I know the minute I say Mexican food, it's going to be met with, I don't want that. So I'm going to have a choice to make. As the driver of the car and the holder of the wallet, I'm going to have a choice to make. Of do I pursue what I want and take us over to Mi Familia, or, I don't know. I can't remember the name of, what's the one in Greentown again? I can't remember the name of it. El Patron, thank you. I love it. It's fantastic. Get the chori pollo. Thank me later. Well, maybe you won't thank me afterwards, but I could take him there, or I could take him to go get hamburgers, or I could take him to go get Chinese food. Those are the decisions I'm going to have to make. It's easy to say, don't be selfish. When we face those moments where our gut is telling us to do what we want to do, to pursue what we want to have, it's so hard to practice. It is so difficult for us to be able to do that. And yet, if we want to have those loving relationships around us, we have to be willing to pursue selflessness. If our unity as a church body is going to mean anything to us, if it's ever going to happen, if it's ever going to be something that we are consider to be important, then it starts when you and I and everyone around us chooses selflessness. You've heard me say before, you'll hear me say it again, I'm sure, probably. The true model of the church should be a bunch of people who are tripping over each other trying to wash one another's feet. To do everything that we can to try to serve the person next to us. To do everything we can to just love them and show them the true love of Jesus by demonstrating it. It's hard. It takes effort. It's a difficult thing for us to move past. It is a choice that we have to make constantly. Not daily, not weekly, not once. Not when we reach the invitation tonight and you have that little quiet time of prayer with God and say, I'm going to choose to be selfless from here on out. That's nice. But you're going to have to choose it again 10 minutes from now. It's a difficult thing, but it's so important. We have to constantly do, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, do nothing. That's a big word. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but rather to the interests of others. It is constant. It is unending. It is difficult. But if we value unity, if we consider it to be not just a priority of the church, but perhaps the priority of our time shared together, if we could grasp even just a small amount of how important God views our unity, then we'll choose selflessness. Be careful. Look out. Be mindful of that which divides. Because our unity is the biggest and best tool for us reaching the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. As we close out this series, and I promise next week we're going to talk about something other than unity, but as we close it out, I want to remind you of what Jesus prayed. In John chapter 17, verse 21, shows us how important our unity is to him. He said, may they all be one. As you, Father, are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe you sent me.